The Q's regular season's almost over. The NHL's regular season's almost over. And the World Baseball Classic is over. And we've got opinions. Stick around at Sports QuaranTV. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Sports QuaranTV. Chris, Dobson, Gerry Green here to talk about what everybody wants to hear us talk about. That is, of course, sports. We've got a barrage of things to talk about. You noticed a little bit of a background. I decided to bring the fish into the show this week.
Yes.
I think I'd class it up just a little bit. But, Gerry, we've got a great show tonight. We've got a lot to talk about, and we're going to start where we usually start, and that is, of course, with the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. The regular season is winding down. We're in its final weekend. But there's a couple interesting things to note going into this weekend because not all the playoff matchups are set yet.
No, they're not, Chris. And the interesting thing, and it doesn't happen very often, Chris, that there's 10 teams in the Eastern Conference. There's 8 teams in the Western Conference. But if one of the other two teams, 9 and 10, I don't want to confuse you on this, one of the bottom finishers in the Eastern have a better record than the bottom finishers in the Western, well, you get bumped then. And that's what might happen here because heading into the last weekend, Chris, the St. John Sea Dogs, they've gone 4-2-2 in their last 10 to get them in a playoff spot. They're 15th overall. 15 and 16 will get in. It's them, Val-d'Or, and Blainville. Blainville only has, Val-d'Or only has 1 game left. Blainville has 2, and the St. John Sea Dogs have 2. Let's cue them up for you here. They've got the Charlottetown Islanders coming in, of which they just beat in Charlottetown 7-2, and then beat them in a shootout in St. John this past week. But they have to go back to Charlottetown. Now, Charlottetown might be cranky. That's going to be their last home game. Going to try to get a victory. And then St. John comes home on the final day of the season, which is Saturday, I believe, and play Bathurst. They just got a couple of shootout or overtime losses in Bathurst in their last couple of games. But the good point here, Chris, is that St. John already has a point lead on Blainville and Val-d'Or. And Blainville and Val-d'Or have a tough chore to come up with some points this weekend. Let me explain. Blainville has a home-and-home with Gatineau. Chris, have you heard that the Gatineau Olympic have won 21 in a row? And what do you think of when you say a team has won 21 in a row?
Well, if you look at it directly, Gerry, first of all, amazing feat and kudos go out to the Gatineau Olympic. But at the same time, we were looking it up before coming on because we were trying to figure out what the record was. We knew they must be getting close. And if you go back, the record, of course, is 28 regular season games by Sidney Crosby's Rimouski Oceanic. And, you're well aware of this. You said you were listening to the game on the radio when they were playing in that Mem Cup that year. But overall, 21 in a row, nothing to scoff your hat at. Now, I'll be curious to see, actually, this is a good question for you. Let me ask you this. So because the regular season's winding down, they go into the postseason. If it's regular season wins, will they keep this streak next season? Like, will it keep going? Will they count 22, 23, 24 in the regular season? Just figured I'd ask.
Yes. But see, so that getting back to the standings. So Blainville has to play Gatineau back-to-back. Blainville's already a point behind St. John. Val-d'Or has 1 game left, and it's against their arch rivals from Rouyn-Noranda, who just beat them the other night, a 9-8 in a shootout. But they're 2-6-1 versus Rouyn-Noranda, and they're going to play at home against the Huskies. So the chances are good, Chris. I'm not going to say it's locked up. St. John needs to collect at least a point versus Charlottetown and Acadie Bathurst, and I think they can get 2 at home against the Titan. And wouldn't it be something, though? I mean, they won the Memorial Cup. You expect a little bit of a fall, and they have fallen. But it seemed like it was no way, probably a month ago, that you thought the St. John Sea Dogs were going to get into the playoffs. Now, if they do get into the playoffs, Chris, it's going to be in the first round, either Sherbrooke or Gatineau. But you're in the playoffs, and that, right. The young players that they have are going to get some seasoning and playoff intensity and playoff seasoning, all that kind of stuff, which will bode them well going down the road. The other thing I noticed about the Gatineau Olympic and their 21 games, Chris, is that Riley Kidney has been there 26 games. So in theory, since Kidney's arrived, 21-5. 21-5 since he arrived, and he's got a whale of a point streak going since he got there. I think he's got a point in every game he's been in since he's got there. Chris, let's talk about the other New Brunswick team and the Moncton Wildcats, their perspective's a little bit different. They want to get home ice advantage. And to do that, they have 2 games versus Cape Breton still left, and they've got another game versus Acadie Bathurst in Bathurst on the last game. No, it's on Saturday or Friday night, rather. So they have 3 games left. Rimouski and Chicoutimi are chasing them. And this is for in the division 3, 4, and 5. So 3 and 4 are going to get home ice advantage. And I think that's what Moncton's shooting for here. And they've got a good chance because Rimouski's got to go home and away with Quebec, who they've not beaten at all this season. And Chicoutimi has to play Baie-Comeau, arch rivals, who've been fighting new tooth and nail all season long. So those ones are up for grabs. So it should be interesting coming down the stretch there for the Moncton Wildcats. I hope they get home ice advantage, Chris. They've had an up and down season too.
Look, Moncton, out of all the teams that kind of go through, if you look at, and again, not to bring up the past, but since then, if you look at, the playoff roster, since that Memorial Cup potential year Moncton's had, this is the run. Like, again, they're not going to be stacked for another year or two. However, it would be good to see Moncton get home ice. It shows progression of the team as things have kind of topped off to that sell year that they were looking to, their buy year, they looked to win. Then they started the rebuild. Richie put everybody through it, and then once they, Dan Lacroix came on in, everything was going well, everything was going great. And now they're trending upward. If they could get home ice advantage for the playoffs, the Avenir Center will be bumping and the fans will be out in full force. It'd be great for them.
And just the other thing going on,
sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, I was going to say, I was actually looking at the numbers too, going back to St. John a little bit. And of course, with Val-d'Or against Rouen being the final game for Val-d'Or's season, St. John technically at this point, if Val-d'Or loses in regulation, it doesn't matter, right? Like, because they're 1 point behind St. John at this point with one game left on the season. So yeah, a win for St. John solidifies it, but a loss in regulation by Val-d'Or also solidifies it. But where will they fall? Will it be 15 or 16?
Moncton has their pick, doesn't it? Don't they?
I'd have to confirm that.
Somebody has Val-d'Or's pick.
Yeah,
thought I read it somewhere. Anyways, nonetheless, Chris, and the overall standings are still up for grabs too. Quebec and Halifax, both with 103 points, or both, with 103 points. Quebec's won 5 in a row. Halifax has won 4 in a row. They're gonna see who's going to be the leader in the Eastern Conference and the overall standings. And really, Chris, Gatineau won 21 in a row. They're 3rd overall. They're number 1 in the CHL, by the way.
Crazy.
The Gatineau Olympic. And there's 3 points behind Halifax and Quebec. So how good are the Quebec Rampart and the Halifax Mooseheads that a team goes on a 21-game streak, maybe they were that far back, that Gatineau's on there, will not, I don't think, have a chance to win the overall standings.
What's interesting to me about the Quebec and the Halifax race at the top, and this is taken away from the fact that we've already talked about Gatineau and how great they are, but what's interesting, if you look at the last 10 between Halifax and Quebec both, Halifax is 9-1 in their last 10. And yes, Quebec's won 5 in a row, but they're 6-4 in their last 10. So if you're going to start to slip now is not the time to do it. Right now, the Halifax Mooseheads look like they're going to be riding a high going into the postseason.
Yeah, I always like playoff hockey, and we're getting a taste of it in the province with the MHL, but the Q's always fun. And I certainly hope 2 New Brunswick teams get in.
And speaking of Halifax, before we move on, we just got to give a quick shout out to Cam Russell, of course, general manager of the Halifax Mooseheads. He was chosen by Hockey Canada this week to go on in and represent from a GM perspective and how that's going on. Good for him. That's amazing. They're really starting, the Great World Junior Tournament that took place down in Halifax and Moncton. If you look at Hockey Canada as a whole and what's going on, it's a great accomplishment. Look what Cam Russell's done for the Mooseheads. Good representative for Hockey Canada and, good pick. Wish him all the best. But that being said, Gerry, let's move on. Let's talk about the National Hockey League. Let's go so much we can talk about. Where do you want to start? Do you want to go through the Canadian teams first? Where do you want to go?
What do we got? I think we got about 10 games left, eh? And there's still the wild cards are still wide open. More in the wide open in the West than the East. There's still some divisional spots up for grabs in the West too, but the East has your teams like the Islanders doing a surge. The Washington Capitals are trying to get in. Pittsburgh's out of the bubble at this point and trying to get back in, but I can't see a playoff without Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins, Chris. I hope it doesn't happen.
No, I don't either. And it would be weird because they were off, Pittsburgh was playing some of the best hockey they've played in years at about the midway point of the season. And to see how things kind of started to trail off a little bit. And then, Ron Hextall thought he was making, started looking at trades and how it all took place. And, when they traded Mike Matheson for Jeff Petrie. They thought that was going to be an upgrade on the blue line for him. Overall, Pittsburgh looks like it's been selling, but you're right. Without Sidney Crosby, especially who was off to the hottest start since 2006, since he got drafted, essentially, basically when the season started. But yeah, it would be a weird thing to not see the Pittsburgh Penguins in the postseason this year.
Well, I don't know how many Canadian teams we're going to see, Chris. You think of Toronto and you think of Edmonton, but when you talk about Winnipeg and Calgary, Calgary losing in LA this week, I thought was a real sign for me. Just like I watched the Jets and having lost here or there, the Jets. I think the statistic I heard the other day was won 5 of their last 17. 5 of their last 17. They went from battling Dallas for the Central Division lead to now sitting in the last wildcard spot, and they have Calgary and them breathing down, and Nashville breathing down their neck. And I don't know if they can hold them off, Chris, with 10 games left. And supposedly they've got that Western road trip where they go to Anaheim, San Jose, and LA. Well, Anaheim and San Jose should be points. I can't guarantee you they're going to get points in either of those locations.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And if you look at Calgary right now and the wheels and media outlets and everything, the wheels are just falling apart in Calgary right now.
Yeah.
Now players are saying they won't play for Sutter starting next year. It looks like they're trying to basically set I don't know what's happening in Calgary, but management's going to have to make a decision. But as it stands right now, Calgary's 4 points behind Winnipeg. And like you said, Winnipeg seems to be slipping. Calgary's not who I'd be worried about. Nashville is who I'd be worried about. Because like you said, they've got 3 games in hand on everybody. They've only played 69 this season so far. And they're 5 points away from that 8th and final spot outside of Winnipeg. So I don't know what's exactly going to take place. I would love to see as many Canadian teams in the postseason as is humanly possible. Mm-hmm. But if we're being real right now, I'm looking at, Ottawa's, I'm not feeling good. I think, they're so far enough about it. I mean, they're not mathematically eliminated. I think they're 6 points out of that spot, but
yes. But if they could have played this type of hockey, Chris, if they could have played this type of hockey earlier in the season, they just dug themselves, the Senators, in just too big a hole. But I'm telling you, every time I turn them on, and we get them a lot here in Atlantic Canada, we get almost every one of their games. And I love to watch them because I love the way they move the puck. I don't think it's any sort of thing they can fix because they've got a good, young, talented team that's just going to get better. And just started too late this season, but really, really fun to watch. And I think, and I've said it before, I think Brady Tkachuk is the best captain, one of the best. Patrice Bergeron, I can't take it away from one of the best captains in the NHL for leadership, scoring ability, toughness, everything. He's a complete package. What a pickup! And so happy that Ottawa signed him in the long term. He is terrific to watch.
Absolutely. And to think Montreal Canadiens fans could have had him, but instead they drafted Jesperi Kotkaniemi. They chose to go that route instead. But that being said, no, I agree. I loved everything. We've talked about Ottawa many times on the show. The question mark for me right now is going to remain, and that is, of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs. We're currently sitting 4th in the Eastern.
Yeah, let's talk about
right
them.
now. They're 1 point ahead of the Rangers. The Rangers are 1 point behind them for 5th in the overall in the East. Look, Toronto's playing Tampa, but it's going to be where will they be playing? Now, I think this is going to be Toronto's year to get out of the first round because Tampa's played a lot of hockey over the last 3 or 4 years, and they're starting to show it. They came off a loss to the Montreal Canadiens. Mind you, the Leafs came off a brutal loss to the New York Islanders this week, but they're going to see how this whole thing's going to rebound. And to me, can they get the monkey off their back? I'm not completely sold on the situation yet. Austin Matthews is going to have to be the Austin Matthews that people are used to seeing. He's been a shade of himself this season. Now, a report came out that he's been playing through an injury most of the year. I just don't know. Like, obviously, as a Habs fan, I would absolutely love to somehow see Tampa Bay upset Toronto again in the first round. I think it would make me ecstatic. But you got to think that with everything that Kyle Dubas has done, he did say that the moves he made, and I apologize, I can't remember the big acquisition he had that got injured. Drawing a brain fart here. Anyway, he's got hurt. They said he'll be back before the postseason. Ryan O'Reilly. There we go. And
yes,
as soon as Ryan O'Reilly went down. No, I was in the same boat. And then when Ryan O'Reilly, the Dubas says he'll be healthy and ready to go for the postseason. But do you think this is the year? Like, what's considered a bust for the Leafs at this point? I mean, if they make it past the first round, or do they have to go to the conference final for Dubas to keep his job?
So they have all these new ingredients.
Right.
And reading some of the media stuff out of Toronto is It's always a constant discussion about who's in and who's out of the lineup. Healthy, like trying these new pieces in new places and new lines here and there.
Right.
I think they had Nylander down on a third line the other night. Whether or not they're mad at him or whatever the case may be, I don't know. The thing with Toronto is, I mean, you got just a little bit of time here to figure out what chemistry or who's going to work well with who, with the playoffs, coming down real quick by the end of the month, early into April. And I don't know if they've figured out who they are, let alone who's going to play where.
Right.
I still don't. Yeah, the Tampa Bay Lightning and Vasilevsky, I mean, they mentally can turn it on, and they have that confidence. You have a very a very shattered ego in Toronto in regards to it can be easily cracked with any sort of negativity. Where the Tampa Bay Lightning, even though they've lost games along the way, Montreal, whoever, and so forth, I still think they're so mentally tough that they'll be ready for Toronto and would love to put it to them again, where Toronto will be sitting on pins and needles with the new pieces and new places and trying to do everything well. And I'm not sold on their goaltending, and you got Vasilevsky on the other end. That is simply a way to put it for me.
Bang on. I'll take playoff Vasilevsky 7 out of 7 days a week. Before we move on, we got to talk about Alexander Ovechkin. Broke one of Gretzky's records this week. For the 13th season, Ovi has scored 40 goals. Gretzky held that record at 12 seasons with 40 plus. That's one down. He's got one to go that he's trying to fly. Imagine him another 40-goal season here with the Washington Capitals.
Well, Chris, I think he has 820 goals. He's 74 behind Gretzky. And he just put up another 40-goal season. So you're telling me it could take him 2 more years? He's 37 now, 38 and 39. And you've watched him play, Chris, and he missed some games. He left with a family emergency. He missed, I don't know, did he miss 5, 8, 10 games, something like that?
Right around
I still think he's one of those players that is, maybe a Rod Brindamore or a Gary Roberts that takes good care of his body. Yeah,
no,
who takes good care of their body and have always been that way. And would he get another couple seasons out of him? If he does and gets 40 goals in each, even if he gets 35 in each, he'd still play at 40 and try to get those last 4 or 5. I think it's breakable. I think that record is possibly up for grabs for Ovechkin.
Barring an injury, I think there's no way he doesn't continue to play until he breaks this record, as long as he can get it done in the next couple of years. All right, Gerry, let's move on. We got to talk about the finish that was the World Baseball Classic. Did it win you over? I'm not sure if you watched a ton of it. I mean, do you like the idea? I mean, the finale and the finish to seeing Ohtani going toe-to-toe and watching that whole thing go, hands down, best baseball player out there right now. But to watch him and Trout end this game, what'd you think of it? Did it win you over? Did you love it? What are your thoughts?
What it did do, Chris, is win me over in becoming an Ohtani fan. We here don't get a chance to see him very much. I don't think I've seen him pitch a whole game or see him start a game and watch that game and see how he performs. Last night I got to see, and he didn't start the game. He came in really as a closer. Right. He has a few pitches there that is pretty hard for a power hitter like a Trout, who's waiting for the fastball, and that sinker looks like a fastball, and it just drops off the plate. Trout never touched anything. He didn't foul one off. He swung at a couple fastballs and missed it, and then he chased a couple other pitchers. And I'm telling you, I have a more, go back a season or so, and you and I having the discussion about Vladdy and Ohtani, who's going to be the MVP, and Ohtani's doing 2 things rather than one and matching Vladdy's numbers. Well, watching Ohtani pitch now, I think he is a man that is unique to the game right now, and is unique in the abilities that he does have. And I'm a tremendous fan right now. And that drama at the end was just stupendous. The only thing I didn't like, Chris, I don't like the J on their helmets. It looks like Jiffy Lube. I think they have Jiffy Lube hats on. That's the only thing. It's kind of like it was a real dull little logo.
We'll have to reach out to the WBC and let them know that the machine doesn't like their logo. But some interesting facts about that. You talked about Ohtani, and first of all, I couldn't echo what you're saying any better than you did, because you're right. Out of the two of them, we had that conversation about who's better. And I'm not taking anything away from Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but I think what just happened in this tournament is that I think Shohei Ohtani showed everybody, hey guys, it's not even close. This is what I can do. Now, some interesting notes about Ohtani from this tournament was nobody hit a ball harder, nobody hit a ball further, or threw a pitch faster at all in the entire tournament than Shohei Ohtani has done. Just remarkable. And I know you are right. When we talked about this before and what his accomplishments were, he is doing something that has not been done since Babe Ruth was playing the game. I'm not trying to compare Ohtani to Babe Ruth, but what I'm saying is if you're looking at how this is done, Ohtani has changed the fundamental way baseball is being played. I can't wait to see him in there with the pitch clock. Once he's in there from both sides, it's interesting to me. Either way, I know that Shohei Ohtani is the real deal. He proved it for Japan. Kudos to them to win this whole thing. It was fun to watch. I feel bad for Mike Trout, but at the same time, that's how legends are made, man. That's awesome. Well, you know what they say, Jerry, all good things must come to an end. It's time to wrap it up. So let's hit the wrap right away. We're going to start off the hop. Gardner McDougall's collected some more hardware, Jerry. Tell him about it.
Yeah, he sure has, Chris. He and his UMB Reds collected their 9th championship in men's hockey and CIS action in PEI, which has been a busy place. They had the Canada Games there last week, and they have the University Championships there, and UMB goes through undefeated by getting the victory over the Alberta Golden Bears. But it was interesting subject through the tournament when the Alberta Golden Bears met the UPEI Panthers in the semifinals, Chris, and there was 3,800 people in the Charlottetown Civic Center, and it got a little bit of ruckus. There was a little bit of rough play, and Alberta's coach decided, well, we don't want to have anything spill over after the game, of which they won 4-1, and they didn't shake hands. Didn't go very well with the folks in PEI, and it became big news throughout Sunday morning before the championship, which was that night. The University of Quebec at Trois-Rivières gets the bronze. Alberta gets the silver, and the UMB Reds, who interestingly, Chris, I took a look at the roster, 27-man roster, 7 from New Brunswick, 16 from Ontario, 3 from Quebec, and 1 from PEI. Another interesting footnote from the championship game, absolutely no penalty minutes in the game, Chris. Not one penalty was called. It seems like there's more NFL news, Chris, coming out of Washington. What's the story?
Well, it's just a small update. We have nothing to hit on, but it's interesting to note that Canadian billionaire Steve Apostolopoulos has become the newest potential bidder for the Washington Commanders. Now, the reason this is big is, of course, Dan and Tanya Snyder have openly made it official. In fact, last I heard, I think Dan's already cleared out his office. They're going to be signing the Commanders officially. We touched the story a while back. Right now, I believe the value list of the franchise is $5.6 million. What's really interesting about this is Apostolopoulos, they've also had recent discussions to buy the Charlotte Hornets from Michael Jordan, but it looks like he's going to pull that bid away and spend way more time on focusing on the Washington Commanders. So, anytime you see a Canadian involved, let alone a Canadian billionaire get involved, I'm all for it. Go down to Washington, make it work. But either way, we'll keep our eye close to this one because it looks like a sale is imminent, and we're going to see exactly how things are going to go from there. The MHL division semis are underway, Jerry. How did we get here?
The Maritime Hockey League's first weekend of playoff activity last weekend, and the top team out of Yarmouth, who their coach, Laurie Barron, was named the coach of the year today, is having their way, I guess, with the Pictou County Crushers. They have a 3-0 series lead there. Truro and Pictou are playing, or rather Truro and Valley are playing in the other series. They finished 2-3 in the South Division, and they're tied at 1 apiece. The interesting matchup happened in Summerside, where Campbellton went in there and they played 2 in Summerside because geographically, Chris, they're quite a distance apart. So they said, let's play 2 games. And they did, and Campbellton won the first one in overtime, and it took double overtime for Summerside to win the second one. So they're tied at 1. Miramichi goes into Edmonton and wins. Edmonton goes into Miramichi and wins. They're tied at a game apiece as well. So all that action continues this week, and I'll keep you updated next week as well. Let's see, Rory McIlroy, get us an update, Chris, on what he seems to be talking about these days.
Well, for once, he's not talking about the Live Tour, so we'll start there and make it real exciting. But either way, yeah, Rory has come out. Rory, the most powerful active voice in golf right now, He did take it, telling the no laying up guys, and that he supports the local model that Bodies proposed a week ago that would limit how far and how fast the golf ball flies. Now, what's interesting about this is there's some talk about potentially changing the ball itself, which would change flight path. Now, he did kind of have a chuckle. Said selfishly, I think it helps me. He did call it an unpopular opinion. You look at Justin Thomas, Keegan Bradley, Webb Simpson, among many other peers he talked about. They're all against it, but he's been vocal for it. I think at this point, they're trying to figure out whether this makes sense or not. But if Rory's for it, somebody's going to listen. I originally thought if you're going to stop the trajectory of the long ball, I mean, it's going to see exactly, your Bryson DeChambeaus of the world. Those are the types of long hitters. But hey, I don't know. I'm golf with you. I'm a terrible golfer, so maybe I'm not the guy to make this decision. But overall, like I said, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, the PGA is trying to tweak a few things here and there to kind of stay competitive. You saw their purses getting raised and everything going on at the PGA. Look, I know they're doing this all to compete with LIV and make the game better. But either way, we'll keep another close eye on this one too, because I'm not sure how it's going to roll out. But if Rory's talking, people are listening. Jerry, the Flyers and the Capitals are still going at it. What's the update here? I mean, what a series it's been.
It has been. It's the under-18 championship, which the Moncton Flyers are undefeated, Chris. If you remember this time last year, the Flyers went through the playoffs undefeated. They went through the Atlantics undefeated, and then they went to the TELUS Cup and brought that home. That was just a year ago. Amazing how time flies. But anyways, the Flyers have a 6-point to 4-point lead on the Fredericton Capitals. It's the first to 8 points. And that is resuming tonight in Fredericton for game number 6. And then game 7, if necessary, is going to be Saturday in Moncton. So Fredericton's going to be hosting the Atlantics, Chris, that happened on March 30th. So both of these teams are getting in, but you want to go in as a champion, not a host. And that's what the Capitals are trying to do. They still have some work to do as Moncton leads the series 6 points to 4. March Madness is continuing, Chris. It was fun, wasn't it? Or it is fun, isn't it?
It has been the craziest March Madness we have seen in a long time. Overall, my thoughts on how it's going to go. Look, I've still got Texas to win the whole thing. I don't think they're going to. I think if you're looking at odds right now, odds makers still have Alabama. They've got the Crimson Tide at plus 400 right now. They are the tournament's #1 seed. They're powered by an offense that's generating 82.2 points per game. It's 7th in the nation, Jerry. They're also 3rd in the country in adjusted defensive efficiency, 31.7 defensive rebounds, 44.2 overall boards per game. I don't see anybody beating Alabama, although for my bracket, I'm certainly hoping that Texas makes it through. Well, guys, that's going to wrap it up for us. I hope you've had a great time. We've loved being here. Thanks for listening to us, and we'll see you next Thursday.